Just a few more things along the line of karma. One is the difference between naturally negative actions and prescribed actions. Okay? So prescribed actions are things that the Buddha in our precepts said not to do, but naturally negative actions are ones that in general, if an ordinary person does them, they create negative karma. And some people say even if you have realizations, you know, there might be some negative karma involved, but in general, speaking about ordinary beings. So something like killing, stealing, lying, these things, you know, in general, whoever does them, they have a bad motivation. And so they're called naturally negative actions because, you know, our mind is polluted with anger, attachment, or the kind of rationalization and justification that makes it motivated by confusion. Okay? Whereas things like eating in the evening, even drinking alcohol, these things are not naturally negative. Okay? So in the context of the precepts, so the ones that aren't naturally negative, in the context of the precepts, the Buddha may have said that monastics or lay people should not do these things. And so therefore, if you take that precept, you know, that becomes a prescribed action, and thus if you do it, you're creating some negative karma because you're going against what the Buddha prescribed. Okay? So if we take an example of killing, for example, anybody who does that, whether they have a precept or don't have a precept, there's negative karma that they create. If on top of that you have a precept not to kill, then there's some additional negative karma because you have the precept and you're violating your precept. Okay? So that's why when we do the sojung, which we'll do tomorrow, or the posada, the purification and restoration thing, you know, confession that we do every 2 weeks, we confess both the naturally negative and the prescribed actions, yeah, and then we reinstate ourselves. You know, the way to kind of reinstate it is then, if you have a complete sangha, you listen to the recitation of the precepts, or because we don't have a complete sangha, we're declaring our purity, yeah, and so in that way you've kind of admitted if there's any prescribed actions that you violated and cleared all that up. Okay, so that's the importance of going to sojung. The negative part, like if you deliberately kill an animal or something, the negativity because it's a naturally negative action, you purify through Vajrasattva, 35 Buddhas, 4 opponent powers. But the part of it being a prescribed action, you purify through going to the posada ceremony. Okay? And then other things like, you know, going outside of the boundary alone, or, you know, these kinds of things, then you would, that are not naturally negative but are prescribed, then you purify those by going to the posada. Okay? Everybody clear? Makes some sense? But it's helpful to know the difference between what is naturally negative and what is prescribed, because, you know, the way you accumulate karma is different around them. Okay? Because, let's say, eating in the evening, going outside the boundary, bathing more than twice a month, you know, these things are not naturally negative. Because if people without precepts do them, there's, you know, they don't necessarily have a negative intention. They may, you know, so very often drinking alcohol, you know, if you have, you know, are taking intoxicants and you have intention, you have attachment, then you're creating negative karma, yeah, okay, by the power of the intention. Okay? People getting it? So this is helpful to know in understanding our precepts and how we create karma and so on. And then in also looking that, you know, why the Buddha prohibited alcohol and intoxicants is because if you do that, then you go and create all the other ones which are naturally negative. Okay? Yeah. Whereas, let's say something like eating in the evening or going outside the boundary or bathing more than twice a month or these kinds of things, somebody who does that doesn't necessarily have attachment. A monastic is allowed to do those things in certain conditions. And, when there's the certain conditions, then there's not the creation of negative karma by doing those things. But it's still good to realize, to remember what those precepts are, even if we have the necessary conditions to make it an exception to that at that time. Okay?